The vinyl crackled to life beneath Lily Lambert's fingertips, the familiar static preceding the first notes of a forgotten jazz classic. She smiled, taking in the musty, comforting scent of nostalgic notes, the vintage record store that had become her sanctuary over the past 2 years. Located in a brick-walled corner of downtown Portland, it was barely surviving in the age of digital streaming. But to Lily, that only made it more special. "I think this Coltrane will speak to you," she said, carefully sliding the record back into its worn sleeve before handing it to the elderly gentleman who'd been browsing the jazz section for the better part of an hour. "It's the kind of album that feels like coming home." The man's eyes crinkled at the corners as he nodded appreciatively. "You've never steered me wrong before, dear." As the bell above the door jingled, Lily glanced up, her attention immediately drawn to the tall figure entering the shop. It wasn't his expensive-looking coat or the quiet confidence in his stride that caught her eye, it was the way he paused at the threshold, inhaling deeply, as if savoring the distinctive aroma of aging paper, vinyl, and wood that defined nostalgic notes. Lucas Harrington had discovered the small record shop purely by accident 3 weeks ago, ducking inside to escape an unexpected downpour. What was meant to be a temporary shelter had turned into a 3-hour exploration of the store's extensive collection. He'd returned 5 times since, though the weather had been perfectly clear. "Good afternoon," Lily called out, recognizing him as the man who'd purchased an original pressing of Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon last week. "Back for more treasure hunting?" Lucas smiled, shrugging off his coat. "Always. I'm beginning to think this place has some sort of gravitational pull." What Lily didn't know, what nobody in the small shop knew, was that Lucas Harrington could have bought the entire building without making a dent in his fortune. At 33, he'd built Harrington Innovations into a global technology empire, specializing in sustainable energy solutions. His net worth had recently crossed the billion-dollar threshold, a fact that made headlines in business magazines, but meant nothing to him compared to finding an original pressing of the Beatles' Revolver, in mint condition. "The classical section got a new shipment yesterday," Lily offered, ringing up the elderly customer's purchase. "Some really beautiful Debussy recordings from the 60s. Lucas nodded appreciatively. "I'll check it out, but first," he hesitated, then pulled out his phone, scrolling through a list. "I've been trying to track down a specific Nina Simone album, Wild is the Wind, the 1966 original pressing." Lily's eyes lit up. "You have excellent taste." "We actually have a copy that came in last month. It's a bit pricey, though the condition is near perfect." "Price isn't an issue," Lucas replied automatically, then caught himself. In his normal business circles, such a statement wouldn't raise eyebrows, but here in this modest shop, he was trying to maintain his cover as just another music enthusiast. "I mean, for the right record, it's worth the investment." Lily disappeared into the back room, returning moments later with a record carefully encased in a protective sleeve. "This one's special," she said, her voice taking on a reverent quality that Lucas found instantly endearing. "I almost bought it myself, but my rent had other ideas." As she carefully removed the record from its sleeve to show him the condition, Lucas found himself watching her hand's slender fingers adorned with 2 simple silver rings, handling the vinyl with practiced care. Her dark curls fell forward as she leaned over the counter, and he noticed a small tattoo of a treble clef behind her ear. "It's perfect," he said, though he was only half looking at the record. "I'll take it." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the record, and Lucas felt an unexpected jolt of connection. He dated casually over the years, but his relentless work schedule and the constant suspicion that women were interested in his wealth rather than him had left him guarded. Here, in this small store where he was just another customer, he felt oddly liberated. "You work here every day?" he asked, trying to sound casual as she rang up his purchase. "Tuesday through Saturday," Lily replied, placing the record in a paper bag with nostalgic notes printed in faded blue letters. "I'm actually the assistant manager now, which sounds impressive until you realize there are only 3 of us who work here." Lucas laughed. "Still, it must be nice being surrounded by music all day." "It beats my previous job selling insurance," she said with a grin, "though my bank account occasionally disagrees." The door jingled again as a group of college students entered, loudly debating the merits of vinyl versus digital sound. "That'll be $189.50, Lily said, returning her attention to Lucas. He handed over his credit card, not the black titanium one reserved for business expenses, but a regular card that wouldn't raise eyebrows. As their transaction completed, he found himself reluctant to leave. "Any other recommendations while I'm here?" he asked, lingering at the counter. Lily tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "What's your comfort album? The one you put on when you've had a terrible day and need to reset?" The question caught him off guard. Most people asked about his favorite artist or genre, not something so personal. "Van Morrison's Astral Weeks," he admitted. "My father used to play it when I was a kid." Something in Lily's expression softened. "Excellent choice. Have you explored much of his earlier work with them?" "Not as much as I should have," Lucas confessed. "Wait right here," she said, slipping away to a corner of the store he hadn't explored yet. She returned with a record he didn't recognize. "This is a compilation of their early stuff. Not as refined as his solo work, but there's an energy to it that's special." Lucas took the album, examining the cover. "I'll trust your judgment." "That's dangerous," she teased. "You don't even know me." "Lily," he said, reading her name tag. "I know you have excellent taste in music and that you chose Nina Simone over Making Rent. That tells me enough." She laughed, a genuine sound that made something in his chest tighten pleasantly. "Well, when you put it that way." After purchasing the second record, Lucas reluctantly headed toward the door. "I'll be back to let you know what I think of it," he promised. "I'll hold you to that," Lily replied with a smile that stayed with him long after he'd slid into the back seat of his waiting car. "Back to the office, Mr. Harrington?" his driver asked. Lucas checked his watch. He had a meeting with investors in 40 minutes. "Yes, Marcus. And can you remind me to have Deanne clear some time in my schedule? I need to listen to some music." Marcus nodded, pulling away from the curb as Lucas stared out the window. The paper bag from nostalgic notes clutched in his hand like something precious. The next afternoon found Lucas back at the record store, this time dressed more casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He deliberately left his watch, a custom Patek Philippe worth more than some cars at home. "You're back sooner than I expected." Lily greeted him from behind the counter where she was cataloging a stack of newly acquired records. "That compilation was revelatory," he said truthfully. "I stayed up until 2 in the morning listening to it. Twice." Her face broke into a delighted smile. "That's the highest compliment you could give, though I hope you don't have a job that requires you to be alert in the mornings." If only she knew that he'd conducted a conference call with Tokyo at 7 a.m., negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract while running on 4 hours of sleep, all because he couldn't stop listening to the album she'd recommended. "I manage," he said with a shrug. "Any new arrivals today?" Lily gestured to a crate by the front window. "Fresh batch of 70s rock just came in. Mr. Peterson, the owner, is letting me price them this afternoon. You're welcome to look through while I work if you don't mind the company." "I'd welcome it," Lucas said, perhaps too quickly. For the next hour, they worked side by side in comfortable conversation. Lucas flipped through the records while Lily checked each one for quality, researched market prices, and added them to the store's inventory. He learned that she was 29, had majored in music history before taking a temporary retail job that had somehow lasted 7 years, and had a cat named Bowie who had one blue eye and one green. In turn, he told her that he worked in green energy consulting, technically true if drastically understated, that he'd been collecting vinyl since college, and that he'd recently moved back to Portland after several years working abroad, also true, though he omitted the fact that abroad meant overseeing the opening of his company's international headquarters in Singapore. "So what got you into vinyl in the first place?" Lily asked, carefully placing a price sticker on a Led Zeppelin album. "Most people your age go straight to digital." Lucas considered the question. "I think it's the intentionality of it," he said finally. "Streaming is convenient, but there's something about choosing a record, physically putting it on the turntable and committing to the experience that feels more present. Plus, there's the hunt. The hunt. Finding something rare, something that connects you to a specific moment in music history," he explained, warming to the subject. "It's like touching the past." Lily was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "That's exactly it," she said softly. "Most customers come in talking about investment value or collector status, but that's why I love it too." Their eyes met over a stack of records, and Lucas felt a strange tightening in his chest. In his world of boardrooms and balance sheets, genuine connections were rare. People wanted something from him: funding, connections, the prestige of his company's name. But Lily was looking at him like he was just a person who understood something important about her. "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. Lily blinked, surprised. "What, dinner? Tonight if you're free." "There's a great little Italian place a few blocks from here." He held his breath, realizing too late that he might have overstepped. They'd only had a handful of conversations, all within the context of the store. "I don't even know your last name," she said, but she was smiling. "Harrington," he supplied. "Lucas Harrington." "Well, Lucas Harrington," she said, testing the name. "I happen to be free tonight, and I happen to love Italian food." Relief flooded through him. "Great. I can pick you up at I'll meet you there," she interrupted gently. "No offense, but I make it a policy not to get into cars with men I've just met, no matter how good their taste in Van Morrison might be." Lucas laughed, appreciating her candor. "Smart policy. How about Marcello's at 8? Perfect," she agreed. As he left the store with another record under his arm, a purchase made partly to justify the time he'd spent there, Lucas felt lighter than he had in months. It was only when he was halfway back to his office that he realized he'd have to figure out how to explain his actual career without scaring her off. Lily arrived at Marcello's 5 minutes early, smoothing the front of her emerald green dress self-consciously. It was the nicest thing she owned, purchased for a friend's wedding last year and rarely worn since. The restaurant was small and cozy, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles, exactly the kind of authentic, unpretentious place she loved. She spotted Lucas waiting outside, looking casually elegant in dark jeans and a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt. No tie, she noted with relief. She'd been worried he might be more formal. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached, his eyes warm with appreciation. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "This place looks charming." Lucas held the door for her. "It's one of my favorites, family-owned for 3 generations." The host greeted Lucas by name, leading them to a corner table partly secluded by a brick archway. Lily noticed the easy familiarity between them and wondered how often Lucas dined here. "You come here a lot," she asked once they were seated. Whenever I can, he admitted. Marco, the owner, catered an event for me a few years back, and I've been a regular ever since. The carbonara will change your life. Their conversation flowed easily through appetizers and into the main course. Lucas was knowledgeable about music but refreshingly unpretentious, willing to admit gaps in his musical education that most collectors would have hidden. Lily found herself relaxing, enjoying the rare pleasure of talking with someone who shared her passion without turning it into a competition. "So," she said as they waited for dessert, "green energy consulting. What does that actually involve?" Lucas took a sip of his wine and she noticed a slight hesitation. "I help companies transition to sustainable energy solutions. Solar, wind, that sort of thing." "That sounds important," she said. "Do you enjoy it?" "I do," he replied, and the genuine enthusiasm in his voice made her smile. There's something incredibly satisfying about helping businesses reduce their carbon footprint while actually saving money. The technology has come so far in the last decade. My knowledge of green energy begins and ends with the solar panel on my camping lantern, Lily admitted. "But I respect anyone working to keep our planet habitable," Lucas laughed. "It's not the most exciting dinner conversation, I know. What about you? How did you end up at Nostalgic Notes?" "Pure luck," Lily said. "I was working at this soul-crushing insurance call center, and one day I just couldn't take it anymore. Walked out during my lunch break and never went back. I was wandering around downtown, trying to figure out what to do with my life, when I saw the help wanted sign in the window at Nostalgic Notes." She smiled at the memory. "Mr. Peterson hired me on the spot when I correctly identified an obscure Thelonious Monk record he was playing." "Sometimes the best things happen by accident," Lucas said, his eyes never leaving her face. Dessert arrived, a shared tiramisu that was as delicious as Lucas had promised, and their conversation turned to books, films, and eventually families. "My parents still live in the house I grew up in," Lily told him. "Just outside the city. Dad's a high school music teacher, Mom's a librarian, very modest, very happy. I have a younger brother in grad school in Chicago." "That sounds nice," Lucas said with genuine warmth. "My parents divorced when I was 12. Dad is, a workaholic. Mom remarried a few years later and lives in France now, no siblings." "Do you see them often?" Lily asked, noting the flash of something complicated in his expression. "Mom, yes, a couple times a year. Dad." He hesitated. "Our relationship is complicated. He has certain expectations that I've never quite managed to meet." There was more to that story, Lily sensed, but she didn't press. The evening was too pleasant to weigh down with heavy family dynamics. As they finished their coffee, Lucas asked, "Would you like to take a walk? There's a nice path along the riverfront and it's a beautiful night." Outside, the spring air was cool but not cold. They strolled along the illuminated riverfront path, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that sent little currents of electricity up Lily's arm. It had been almost a year since her last relationship had ended, a mutual but still painful breakup with a fellow music enthusiast whose passion for touring with his mediocre band had ultimately been incompatible with her desire for stability. "Can I ask you something?" Lucas said as they paused to look out over the water. "Of course." "Why records? What is it about vinyl specifically that speaks to you?" Lily considered the question seriously. "Part of it is the sound, that warmth and depth you just don't get digitally. But mostly, it's the history. Each scratch and mark tells a story. Who owned it before, what moments in their lives it soundtracked." She glanced at him. "That probably sounds silly." "Not at all," Lucas said softly. "It's exactly how I feel about my collection." They had stopped walking, facing each other in a pool of light from a nearby lamppost. Lucas was looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'd really like to kiss you," he said quietly, "if that's okay." In answer, Lily stepped closer, tilting her face up to his. His hand came up to gently cup her cheek as he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that started soft and tentative but quickly deepened. His other arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her closer as she wound her arms around his neck. When they finally broke apart, they were both slightly breathless. Lucas rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I've been wanting to do that since you handed me that Nina Simone record," he admitted. Lily laughed softly. "I've been wanting you to do that since you came back to tell me you stayed up all night listening to Van Morrison." Later, as they walked back toward the restaurant where Lily had left her car, their hands were firmly intertwined. They made plans to see each other again. 2 days later, a jazz show at a local venue that Lily had mentioned wanting to attend. As they said goodnight with another lingering kiss, neither of them could have predicted how quickly their lives would become intertwined, nor the complications that Lucas's carefully concealed wealth would eventually introduce into their budding relationship. Over the next 3 weeks, Lucas and Lily fell into a comfortable rhythm. He visited the record store regularly, sometimes just for a few minutes between meetings, other times lingering for hours on slow afternoons. They had dinner together 3 or 4 times a week, discovering a shared love of hole-in-the-wall restaurants with authentic cuisine and zero pretension. On Lily's day off, they explored the city's hidden record shops together, Lucas carefully maintaining his cover as a moderately successful energy consultant. He was strategic about his purchases, occasionally passing on rare finds that he could easily afford to maintain the illusion. What mattered more than the records was watching Lily's face light up when she discovered something special, her encyclopedic knowledge of music making every outing an education. "How do you know all this?" he asked one Sunday as they browsed a dusty shop in a converted warehouse. She'd just given him a detailed history of an obscure British folk label from the 1960s. "I have no idea where my car keys are half the time, but useless music trivia that my brain retains perfectly," she joked. "It drove my professors crazy. I could recite the entire recording history of Blue Note records, but couldn't remember when my papers were due." These little revelations, her absent-mindedness, her preference for coffee with exactly 1 sugar, the way she hummed unconsciously when reading album notes were pieces of Lily that Lucas collected more eagerly than any rare vinyl. For her part, Lily found herself increasingly drawn to Lucas's quiet intensity. He listened when she spoke, really listened in a way few people did. He was thoughtful without being showy, bringing her coffee exactly the way she liked it, or remembering an artist she'd mentioned wanting to explore. Most refreshingly, he seemed completely uninterested in impressing her with material things, preferring simple pleasures to extravagance. The only strange thing was his phone, which sometimes rang incessantly during their dates. He always apologized and stepped away to take the calls, returning with vague explanations about work emergencies. Once, she'd overheard him giving what sounded like very authoritative instructions about a project timeline, his voice taking on a commanding tone she'd never heard him use with her. "You must be pretty important at your company," she observed afterward. Lucas had looked momentarily uncomfortable before shrugging. "Just a time-sensitive project, nothing exciting." It was their only point of disconnection, this sense that there was a part of his life he kept carefully separated from her. But given how new their relationship was, Lily didn't feel she had the right to push. Everything changed on a rainy Thursday evening. They'd planned to meet at a new Thai restaurant after Lily finished her shift, but Lucas had texted to say he was running late due to an unexpected meeting. Lily, already hungry and not wanting to lose their reservation, decided to go ahead and get a table. She was sipping a glass of wine and browsing the menu when a boisterous group of business types entered the restaurant. They were clearly celebrating something, ordering champagne and talking loudly about a successful deal. Lily paid them little attention until she heard a familiar name. "Can't believe Harrington closed it. 300 million just like that. That's why he's a billionaire before 35. The man doesn't mess around. Did you see that article in Forbes? The reluctant billionaire they called him. Hilarious for a guy with a penthouse overlooking the entire city." Lily froze, her glass halfway to her lips. Harrington, billionaire. It couldn't be. But then one of the men continued. "Lucas always was a closer. Remember business school? While we were partying, he was building prototypes in his dorm room." The wine turned sour in Lily's mouth. Lucas, her Lucas, a billionaire. It didn't make sense. He wore simple clothes, drove a modest car when he didn't meet her directly at locations, never flashed money around. But then she thought about the calls, the meetings, the way he sometimes seemed to be editing himself when he talked about work. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Just parked. Be there in 2 minutes. Sorry for the delay." Panic rose in her chest. She wasn't ready to confront him, wasn't even sure what she was feeling beyond a profound sense of confusion, and if she was honest, betrayal. Why would he hide something so fundamental about himself? When Lucas walked in, his face brightening as he spotted her, Lily was already gathering her things. "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well," she said, avoiding his eyes. "I think I need to go home." Concern immediately replaced his smile. "What's wrong? Can I help? Do you need me to take you to a doctor?" "No, I just need to be alone," she said, finally looking at him. The genuine worry in his face almost broke her resolve, but then she glanced over at the group of men still loudly celebrating. One of them had noticed Lucas and was now nudging his companions. Lucas followed her gaze, and she saw the exact moment he realized what had happened. His face drained of color. "Lily, I can explain, not here," she said quietly. "Not now. Please let me drive you home at least," he pleaded. "I'll take a ride share," she replied, already moving toward the door. "I need some time to think." Outside, the rain had intensified, matching her turbulent emotions. She was half a block away when she heard footsteps behind her. "Lily, wait," Lucas called, catching up to her. He was already soaked, his expensive shirt clinging to his shoulders. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." She stopped, turning to face him. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Rain streamed down his face as he ran a hand through his wet hair. "Yes, of course I was. I was trying to find the right time." "The right time? It's been almost a month, Lucas." "I know, and I should have told you sooner. It's just," he broke off, looking miserable. "The moment people find out about my money, everything changes. They see the wealth, not me, and with you. With you it was different. You liked me for me, not for what I could give you or what my name could do for you." Lily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the mild temperature. "So you lied to me." "I omitted," he corrected gently. "Everything I told you about myself was true. I do work in green energy. I own a company that develops sustainable technologies. I do love music and collect vinyl. I did grow up with a workaholic father who's never been satisfied with me. None of that was a lie." A car drove by, splashing water onto the sidewalk near them. Neither noticed. "$1 billion isn't just something you omit, Lucas," Lily said, her voice rising. "That's like saying you omitted having 3 children or being married." Lucas flinched at the comparison. "It's not the same thing." "It is to me. You let me take you to dive bars and food trucks. You let me split checks with you when you probably spend more on coffee each day than I make in a week. I love those places, Lucas insisted. I love that you don't care about expensive restaurants or VIP treatment. Do you have any idea how refreshing that is? So I was what some kind of social experiment, slumming it with the working class to see how the other half lives. The hurt that flashed across his face made her immediately regret the words, but she was too wound up to take them back. Is that really what you think of me? He asked quietly. After everything we've shared, you think I was using you as some kind of novelty. The pain in his voice deflated her anger somewhat. I don't know what to think, she admitted. I feel like I don't know you at all. You know me better than almost anyone, he said, taking a step toward her. My financial situation doesn't change who I am as a person. Maybe not, but it changes the dynamics between us, Lily countered. It changes everything. They stood in silence for a moment, the rain continuing to fall around them. Finally, Lucas spoke. Can we go somewhere dry and talk about this properly? Please. If you still feel the same way afterward, I'll respect that. But please don't walk away without giving me a chance to explain. Lily hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but not tonight. I need some space to process this. Tomorrow, then. I could come to your place or you could come to mine, the real one, he added with a weak attempt at humor. I'll text you, she said non-committally. Good night, Lucas. As she walked away, hailing a ride-share app on her phone, she didn't look back to see Lucas standing in the rain, watching her go with an expression of profound loss on his face. Back in her apartment, Lily paced restlessly, too agitated to sit still. Her cat, Bowie, watched from the couch with mismatched eyes that seemed judgmental. Don't look at me like that, she told him. He lied to me. But had he really? She thought back over their conversations, trying to identify specific falsehoods. He'd never actually claimed to be of modest means. He described his work accurately, if incompletely. Was it a lie of omission, or simply a normal progression of a new relationship, where personal details were revealed gradually? Still, $1 billion wasn't just a minor detail. It was a whole different world, one she had no experience navigating. On impulse, she opened her laptop and typed Lucas Harrington into the search engine. Immediately, thousands of results populated the screen. Forbes articles, business profiles, charity gala photos. She clicked on images and found herself staring at Lucas in various settings, accepting awards, shaking hands with political figures, standing in front of sleek buildings with Harrington Innovations emblazoned on them. In most of these photos, he looked different, more polished, less approachable. But in a few, usually those taken at charity events, she recognized the warm smile and kind eyes of the man she'd been falling for. She clicked on a Forbes profile from 6 months ago. The Reluctant Billionaire: How Lucas Harrington Built a Green Empire While Staying Out of the Spotlight. The article painted a picture of a brilliant but private innovator who had revolutionized solar technology while deliberately avoiding the trappings of tech celebrity. It mentioned his modest office, his refusal to own a private jet despite his wealth, and his substantial anonymous donations to environmental causes. Harrington seems allergic to the billionaire lifestyle. One associate was quoted as saying, "He'd rather be in a lab or reading technical journals than attending galas, though he shows up when it serves the company's mission." By the time Lily finished reading, it was after midnight. Her anger had cooled somewhat, replaced by confusion and a reluctant understanding. The Lucas described in these articles aligned with the man she knew: thoughtful, passionate about his work, uncomfortable with ostentation. But it still didn't explain why he'd kept such a significant part of his identity from her for so long. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was Lucas. "I know you said you'd text me, and I'm not trying to pressure you. I just want you to know I'm sorry and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. No pressure, no rush. I miss you." Lily stared at the message for a long time before finally replying. "Tomorrow, 1 p.m., my place." His response came immediately. "I'll be there. Thank you." Sleep eluded her for most of the night as she wrestled with her conflicted feelings. By morning, she had more questions than answers, but she was at least prepared to listen to what Lucas had to say. At precisely 1 p.m., there was a knock at Lily's door. She took a deep breath, steeling herself before opening it. Lucas stood there, looking like he hadn't slept much either. He dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. "Hi," he said softly. "Come in," she replied, stepping aside. Lucas entered her small apartment, taking in the eclectic decor, vintage concert posters framed on the walls, bookshelves overflowing with paperbacks, and most prominently, a record player surrounded by crates of carefully organized vinyl. Bowie the cat observed him suspiciously from the top of the refrigerator. "Your place is exactly how I imagined it would be," Lucas said, breaking the tension. "It feels like you." Lily gestured toward the couch. "Do you want some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks." As she busied herself in the tiny kitchen, Lucas remained standing, too nervous to sit. "I brought something for you," he said, extending a small paper bag she hadn't noticed he was carrying. Lily hesitated before accepting it. Inside was a record and original pressing of Billie Holiday's Lady Sings the Blues. "I remembered you mentioning it was your mom's favorite, and that you'd been looking for a good copy," he explained quickly. "I found it last week and was saving it for your birthday next month, but, well, I thought now might be a better time." The thoughtfulness of the gift caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly, running her fingers over the worn cover. "How did you remember that? I only mentioned it once in passing." "I remember everything you tell me, Lily," Lucas said simply. She placed the record carefully on her coffee table and brought over 2 mugs of coffee. Finally, sitting down, she took a fortifying sip before meeting his eyes. "I have questions." "I expected you would," he replied. "I'll answer all of them honestly. Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Lucas sighed, cradling his mug. "The simple answer is fear. I've been burned before people who seemed to like me for me, but were really just interested in what I could do for them or what my money could buy." "Do I strike you as that kind of person?" Lily asked, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "Not at all," he said firmly. "But I've been wrong before, and I really like you, Lily, more than I've liked anyone in a very long time. The thought of ruining that was terrifying." "So what was your plan? Just keep pretending indefinitely?" "No," Lucas shook his head. "I was going to tell you. I almost did several times, but it never seemed like the right moment. How do you casually drop, by the way, I'm a billionaire into conversation without it sounding bizarre?" Despite herself, Lily felt a smile tugging at her lips. "Fair point. But a month, Lucas. We've been seeing each other almost every day." "I know. The longer I waited, the harder it became." He set his coffee down, leaning forward. "The truth is, being with you was the first time in years I felt like just a person, not a walking bank account or a business opportunity. It was freeing. Selfishly, I wanted to hold onto that feeling as long as possible." Lily considered his words. "I can understand that to an extent, but relationships need trust to work. How can I trust you now? You're right," Lucas admitted. "I broke your trust and I'm deeply sorry for that. All I can offer is complete honesty from this point forward, and the promise that I'm still the same person you've come to know, just with some additional context you weren't aware of." "That's some pretty significant context," Lily pointed out. "You own a multinational corporation. You're on the Forbes list. That's not just a detail. It's what I do, not who I am," Lucas insisted. "Yes, my company is important to me. I'm proud of what we've built and the difference we're making in renewable energy. But at the end of the day, it's just a job. The things that matter to me, music, books, meaningful connections with people who challenge and inspire me, those are the same regardless of my bank balance. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Those business people at the restaurant last night, they called you the reluctant billionaire. Lucas groaned. That damn Forbes article, I hate that nickname. But it seems accurate from what I read. His eyebrows rose. You researched me. Of course I did, she replied matter-of-factly. You think I was going to have this conversation without doing my homework? For the first time since he'd arrived, Lucas laughed, a genuine sound that lightened the atmosphere between them. I should have expected nothing less. The articles paint you as some kind of anti-billionaire, Lily continued. Is that accurate? Lucas considered the question. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but I've never been comfortable with excessive displays of wealth. My father is the opposite. Everything is about status and appearances with him. I saw how empty that made his life, and I promised myself I'd never go down that path. Yet you own a penthouse overlooking the city, Lily noted, remembering what she'd overheard. I do, he acknowledged. I also fund clean water initiatives in developing countries and scholarship programs for underprivileged students. I'm not a saint, Lily. I enjoy certain comforts and conveniences that my wealth provides, but I try to use my resources responsibly and in ways that align with my values. Lily nodded slowly. I think what bothers me most is that you didn't trust me enough to make my own judgment. You decided for me that I couldn't handle knowing the truth. You're right, Lucas said quietly. That was unfair of me, and I'm sorry. I should have given you more credit. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft purring of Bowie, who had finally decided Lucas wasn't a threat and had settled on the arm of the couch. So where does this leave us? Lucas finally asked, his voice careful. Lily took a deep breath. I honestly don't know. This is a lot to process. I understand, he said, though the disappointment was evident in his eyes. For what it's worth, the time we've spent together has been the happiest I've been in years. Whether you believe it or not, what you've seen is the real me. I believe you, Lily said softly. That's what makes this so confusing. I feel like I know you, but also like I don't know you at all. Lucas nodded, setting down his barely touched coffee. I should go, give you the space you need to think. He stood, hesitating. Would it be all right if I called you in a few days? Lily walked him to the door, feeling a confusing mix of anger, understanding, and a persistent affection she couldn't quite shake. Yes, you can call. I can't promise where my head will be, but I'll answer. That's all I can ask for, Lucas said. At the threshold, he turned to face her. Thank you for listening. Whatever you decide, I'm grateful for that. After he left, Lily returned to the couch, picking up the Billie Holiday record he'd brought. It was exactly what she'd been searching for, a thoughtful gift that showed he'd been paying attention to the small details of her life. That was the Lucas she'd been falling for. Attentive, genuine, passionate about the things she loved. Could she reconcile that person with Lucas Harrington, tech billionaire? She wasn't sure, but she knew she wasn't ready to give up on finding out. 3 days passed without communication between them. Lily threw herself into work at the record store, grateful that Lucas didn't come by to further complicate her already confused emotions. She'd almost convinced herself that the distance was for the best when her phone rang on Sunday morning. Lucas's name flashed on the screen. She answered after the third ring. Hello, hi, his voice was tentative. Is this a bad time? No, it's fine, I'm just having coffee. I've been thinking about you, Lucas said. About us. I miss you, Lily. The simple honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. I miss you too, she admitted. I know I messed up, he continued, but I'd really like a chance to show you that my feelings for you are genuine, regardless of my financial situation. And how would you do that? I'd like to invite you to my home, he said. The real one, no more hiding or half-truths. I want you to see my life as it actually is, and then you can decide if it's something you want to be part of. Lily hesitated. I don't know, Lucas. Just dinner, he pressed gently. No pressure beyond that. I just think it's important for you to see this side of me if you're going to make an informed decision about us. He had a point. How could she judge whether she could handle his lifestyle if she'd never actually seen it? Okay, she agreed finally. When? Is tonight too soon? Say 7 o'clock. Tonight works, she said, surprised at the flutter of anticipation she felt. Text me the address. I will, and Lily, thank you for giving me this chance. After hanging up, she received a text with an address in the city's most exclusive high-rise district. Anxiety immediately set in. What did one wear to dinner at a billionaire's penthouse? What if she used the wrong fork or said something embarrassing? Stop it, she told herself firmly. He's still Lucas. The same Lucas who happily ate street tacos with you and spent hours digging through dusty record bins. Still, she found herself pulling out the one cocktail dress. She owned a simple black number she'd worn to her college roommate's wedding. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant and made her feel confident. Tonight, she'd need all the confidence she could muster. At precisely 6:55 p.m., Lily arrived at the Pinnacle, the gleaming tower that housed some of the city's wealthiest residents. The doorman, apparently expecting her, escorted her to a private elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse level. Mr. Harrington is expecting you, he said with a polite nod, swiping the card and stepping back as the doors closed. The elevator ascended smoothly to the top floor, opening directly into a spacious foyer with marble floors and subtle recessed lighting. Lucas was waiting for her, dressed in dark slacks and a light blue button-down that brought out the color of his eyes. You look beautiful, he said, taking in her dress with appreciation. Thank you, Lily replied, stepping into the apartment and trying not to gape at her surroundings. Your home is... Wow, Lucas smiled self-consciously. It's a bit much, I know. Let me give you the tour before dinner. What followed was a glimpse into a world Lily had only seen in magazines. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of the city and surrounding mountains. The decor was modern but warm, with comfortable furniture arranged to take advantage of the spectacular vistas. The kitchen is my favorite room, Lucas admitted, leading her into a spacious area with professional-grade appliances and a massive island. I love to cook when I have the time. You cook? Lily asked, surprised. I do. Not as often as I'd like, but yes. My grandfather taught me when I was a kid. He said no matter how successful you become, you should always be able to feed yourself. As they continued the tour, Lily noticed something unexpected. Amid the obvious luxury were touches of the Lucas she knew: shelves lined with books ranging from technical manuals to poetry collections. Framed vintage concert posters not unlike those in her own apartment. And most significantly, an entire room dedicated to his record collection. This is where I spend most of my time when I'm home, Lucas said, opening the door to reveal walls lined with custom shelving holding thousands of records, all meticulously organized. In the center of the room stood a high-end turntable setup surrounded by comfortable seating. It's magnificent, Lily breathed, immediately drawn to the collection. She ran her fingers along the spines, noting the breadth and depth of genres represented. Some of these are incredibly rare. I know, Lucas said with a smile. It's taken years to build this collection. Music has always been my escape, especially during the most stressful periods of building the company. As they explored further, Lily began to see that while Lucas's home was undeniably luxurious, it wasn't ostentatious. It felt lived in and personal, reflecting his tastes and interests rather than simply displaying his wealth. Eventually, they made their way back to the kitchen, where Lucas surprised her by donning an apron and pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "I thought we'd have dinner catered," Lily admitted. "I considered it," he replied, "but that wouldn't give you an accurate picture of my normal life. Most evenings when I'm home, I cook for myself. Tonight I'm making coq au vin, my grandfather's recipe. Can I help?" She offered, feeling more at ease than she had expected. "Absolutely. You can chop these mushrooms while I prepare the chicken." They worked side by side, falling into a comfortable rhythm reminiscent of their early dates. Lucas was skilled in the kitchen, moving with the same focused precision he brought to everything he did. As they cooked, he told her more about his company, explaining the technologies they were developing and his vision for a more sustainable future. "The money was never the point," he said as they sat down to eat at a small table positioned to catch the sunset over the mountains. "Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the financial freedom it provides. But what drives me is knowing our work is making a tangible difference in combating climate change." "That's admirable," Lily said sincerely. "And the food is incredible, by the way." Lucas smiled. "Thank you. I'm glad you like it." As they ate, Lily found her earlier anxiety fading. This setting might be different, but the man across from her was undeniably the same person she'd been falling for: thoughtful, passionate, slightly nerdy in the most endearing way. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they finished their meal. "Anything?" "Why me?" "You could literally date anyone: models, socialites, people from your world. Why a record store assistant who lives paycheck to paycheck?" Lucas considered her question carefully. "Because you're real," he said finally. "You're passionate about the things you love. You have strong opinions and you're not afraid to share them. You challenged my take on early Beatles versus late Beatles for 45 minutes on our second date." He smiled at the memory. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? To have someone who isn't calculating what they can get from you with every interaction." Lily felt herself blushing under his intense gaze. "I still think Revolver is better than Abbey Road," she said lightly, trying to deflect. "And you're wrong," he laughed. "But I love that you'll never change your mind just to please me." After dinner, they moved to the balcony with glasses of wine, looking out over the glittering city below. The night air was cool but not cold, and Lucas casually draped a soft throw blanket around Lily's shoulders. "So," he said after a comfortable silence, "what do you think? Now that you've seen this part of my life, is it something you could be comfortable with?" Lily took a sip of her wine, considering. "It's intimidating," she admitted. "This is so far removed from my reality, but you're still you. The same person who gets absurdly excited about finding an original pressing of some obscure jazz album. The same person who remembers exactly how I take my coffee and which Bowie album I think is underrated." Lucas's expression softened. "I am. None of that has changed, I think." Lily paused, gathering her thoughts. "I think I could get used to this part of your life, as long as we don't lose the simplicity of what we had before. I still want food trucks and record hunting and walks by the river." "So do I," Lucas said earnestly. "I never want to lose that. The money, the company, they're parts of my life, but they don't define me. At least, I hope they don't." Lily set down her wine glass and moved closer to him on the outdoor sofa. "They don't," she assured him. "But no more secrets, Lucas. I need to know I can trust you to be honest with me, even about the complicated parts of your life." "No more secrets," he promised, reaching for her hand. "Complete transparency from now on." As their fingers intertwined, Lily felt the last of her reservations melting away. There would be adjustments and challenges ahead. Their worlds were undeniably different, but the connection between them felt worth the effort. Lucas leaned forward, his free hand gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've missed you," he murmured. In answer, Lily closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home. As his arms encircled her, pulling her closer, she knew they were beginning a new chapter, one where both of them could finally be their complete, authentic selves. The next few months brought a period of adjustment, as Lily and Lucas navigated the realities of merging their different worlds. Lucas made a conscious effort to include Lily in all aspects of his life, inviting her to corporate events and charity galas, while still maintaining their simple pleasures of record hunting and quiet evenings. For Lily, the learning curve was steep. The first time she accompanied Lucas to a major fundraiser for his company's educational foundation. She spent hours beforehand researching the guests and practicing small talk to avoid embarrassing him. "You could never embarrass me," Lucas assured her as they drove to the event, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Just be yourself. That's who I want by my side." Easy for him to say, she thought nervously. But as the evening progressed, Lily found her natural warmth and genuine interest in people serving her well. While some of the wealthy attendees were clearly curious about Lucas's new girlfriend, most were welcoming, particularly when the conversation turned to music, a universal language that transcended socioeconomic boundaries. "You were amazing tonight," Lucas told her afterward as they kicked off their formal shoes in his penthouse. "Did you see how you got Bernard talking about his old jazz club? The man usually barely speaks 2 words at these events." "He has some incredible stories," Lily said, smiling at the memory of the elderly investor's animated descriptions of seeing Miles Davis perform in the 1960s. "I didn't even realize who he was until you mentioned it later." "That's exactly why people respond to you," Lucas said, pulling her into his arms. "You're interested in them as people, not as walking bank accounts or business connections." As time passed, Lily became more comfortable in Lucas's world, though she remained determined to maintain her independence. She continued working at Nostalgic Notes, despite Lucas's offer to help her open her own record store. "I'm not ready for that," she told him. "I love my job and I need to know I can support myself." Lucas respected her decision, though he occasionally accidentally discovered rare records that the store could sell at a significant profit, his way of helping without overstepping her boundaries. Meanwhile, Lucas found himself spending more time in Lily's world than he had in years. They frequented local music venues to hear up-and-coming artists, prepared simple meals in her tiny kitchen, and spent Sunday mornings browsing farmers' markets. These ordinary experiences, which had largely disappeared from his life as his wealth grew, became treasured reminders of what truly mattered. The only persistent cloud in their happiness was Lucas's father, Richard Harrington, a successful but emotionally distant businessman who had pushed Lucas relentlessly throughout his life. When Lucas finally introduced Lily to his father over dinner at an exclusive restaurant, Richard made little effort to hide his assessment of her as an inappropriate match for his son. "So you work in a record store," he said, his tone making the occupation sound akin to street sweeping. "An interesting choice, Dad," Lucas warned quietly. "What? I'm making conversation," Richard replied with a dismissive wave. "I'm simply trying to understand what common ground you two possibly share, given the vast differences in your situations." Lily maintained her composure, meeting the older man's gaze directly. We share a passion for music, for authentic experiences, and for treating people with respect regardless of their situations, as you put it." A flash of surprise crossed Richard's face before his expression hardened again. "Passion doesn't build legacies, young lady. Lucas has responsibilities that extend beyond indulging in hobbies and romantic notions." The rest of the dinner proceeded in similar fashion, with Richard making thinly veiled comments about Lucas's need for a strategic partner, while Lucas grew increasingly tense. When they finally parted ways, Lucas was visibly agitated. "I'm sorry about that," he said as they drove home. "He's always been difficult, but that was beyond inappropriate." "Hey," Lily said gently, placing her hand on his arm, "I'm not that easily intimidated. Your father's opinion of me doesn't change how I feel about you." Lucas glanced at her, his expression softening. "How do you do that?" "Stay so centered when people are being deliberately hurtful," Lily shrugged. "Growing up with limited means teaches you that your worth isn't determined by other people's assessments. Besides," she added with a small smile, "your father's approval isn't what I'm after. Yours is the only opinion that matters to me." That night, as they lay together in Lucas's bed, he held her close, grateful for her strength and the perspective she brought to his life. "I love you," he whispered against her hair the first time he'd said the words aloud. Lily tilted her face up to his, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I love you too," she replied without hesitation. 6 months into their relationship, Lucas surprised Lily with a trip to Paris, ostensibly to visit his mother, but with a hidden agenda he kept carefully concealed. They spent magical days exploring the city's legendary record shops, visiting jazz clubs and wandering through museums. Lucas's mother, Catherine, was everything her ex-husband was not: warm, artistic, and immediately welcoming to Lily. She'd remarried a French literature professor and lived in a charming apartment filled with books, art, and music. "You've brought the light back to his eyes," Catherine told Lily privately during an afternoon when Lucas was taking a business call. "I haven't seen him this happy since he was a boy." "He does the same for me," Lily admitted. "I never expected to find someone who understands me so completely." On their last evening in Paris, Lucas took Lily to dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the Seine. As they finished their dessert, a violinist appeared beside their table, playing a hauntingly beautiful melody that Lily recognized immediately. "La Vie en Rose," she whispered, her favorite Edith Piaf song. Lucas took her hand across the table. "The first time I came to your apartment, I noticed you had this record playing. You told me it always made you feel hopeful about love." Lily's eyes widened as Lucas left his chair, kneeling beside her as the violinist continued to play softly. "Lily Lambert," he said, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart, "you've changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and accepted for who I am, not what I own or what I've accomplished." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I want to spend my life creating a harmony with you, one that combines your world and mine into something even more beautiful than either could be alone." Opening the box, he revealed a vintage-inspired ring with a center diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Lily's eyes as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, of course I will." As Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, the other diners broke into applause. He rose to his feet, pulling Lily up with him and into a kiss that promised a lifetime of both simple pleasures and extraordinary adventures. Their engagement made headlines in the business press: tech billionaire Harrington to wed record store employee. But they were too absorbed in their happiness to care. They agreed on a small wedding the following spring, to be held in the botanical garden where they'd spent a memorable afternoon on their fourth date. Nothing extravagant, Lily insisted. Just our closest friends and family. Lucas readily agreed, relieved that she didn't want the kind of society spectacle his father would have preferred. Richard had been predictably disapproving of the engagement, though he'd grudgingly congratulated them after Catherine had apparently given him a stern talking to. "He'll come around eventually," Lucas assured Lily, though he didn't seem particularly concerned either way. "But even if he doesn't, it won't change anything between us." As they began planning their future together, one question loomed large: where would they live? Lucas assumed they would move into his penthouse, but Lily hesitated, still adjusting to the idea of such luxury. "What about a compromise?" she suggested one evening as they discussed the issue. "Something that represents both of us, neither too extravagant nor too cramped." The solution presented itself unexpectedly when Mr. Peterson, the elderly owner of Nostalgic Notes, announced his intention to retire and sell the building that housed the record store, a beautiful old brownstone with an apartment above the shop that had stood vacant for years. "It needs significant renovation," Lucas noted as they toured the dusty apartment with its outdated fixtures and peeling wallpaper. "But structurally, it's sound." Lily walked through the space, seeing past the current condition to the potential beneath. High ceilings, large windows, original hardwood floors, and most significantly the beloved record store just downstairs. "It's perfect," she declared. "We could modernize it while preserving its character. And I could continue working at the store, maybe even buy it from Mr. Peterson with my own savings." Lucas watched her excitement with growing certainty that this was the right move. "I have another idea," he said carefully. "What if we bought the building together? You could run the record store, expand it even, and we could make the apartment upstairs our home. A true merging of our worlds." Lily considered the proposal, appreciating that Lucas had framed it as a partnership rather than simply offering to buy it for her. "I'd want to contribute meaningfully," she said, "not just symbolically." "Of course," Lucas agreed. "We'll work out the financial details fairly. The important thing is that it would be ours, something we built together." Within weeks, they'd made an offer that Mr. Peterson happily accepted, and renovation plans were underway. Lucas hired an architect who specialized in historic preservation, with strict instructions to maintain the building's character while updating the systems and layout to accommodate their needs. "We'll need a proper listening room," Lucas specified during a planning meeting. "And enough space for both our record collections to continue growing. And a kitchen where we can cook together," Lily added, "but nothing too fancy. I still want it to feel like a home, not a showplace." As construction began, Lily took over management of Nostalgic Notes, implementing subtle improvements while maintaining the store's authentic charm. Business increased steadily as word spread about the knowledgeable new manager and her carefully curated selection. Meanwhile, Lucas made a significant decision about his own career, appointing a trusted deputy as CEO of day-to-day operations at Harrington Innovations, while he stepped into a less demanding role as executive chairman. The move raised eyebrows in the business world, but gave him something he'd lacked for years: time to enjoy his success and build a life with Lily. "Are you sure about this?" Lily asked when he told her about the change. "I never wanted you to step back from something you're passionate about." "I'm not stepping back from passion," Lucas assured her. "I'm redirecting it. The company is stable, our new technologies are successfully deployed, and I've been working at an unsustainable pace for over a decade. This change gives me time to focus on what truly matters, including you." By the time spring arrived, bringing with it their wedding day, The renovation of their new home was nearing completion. The apartment above nostalgic notes had been transformed into a warm, inviting space that perfectly blended Lucas's appreciation for quality with Lily's preference for comfortable simplicity. The wedding itself reflected this same balance, intimate but elegant, held in the Botanical Gardens Rose Pavilion with just 60 guests in attendance. Lily wore a vintage-inspired gown she'd found at a local boutique, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Lucas waited for her beneath an arch covered in climbing roses, his expression transforming to one of awe as she walked toward him on her father's arm. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when she reached him. The ceremony was brief but deeply personal, with vows they'd written themselves. Lucas promised to treasure each day with you like a rare first pressing, unique, irreplaceable, and increasingly valuable with time. Lily vowed to create a harmony with you that incorporates all our notes, the high and low, soft and loud, into something more beautiful than either of us could compose alone. Even Richard Harrington, seated stiffly in the front row, seemed moved by the evident love between them. After the ceremony, he approached the couple with an unexpected olive branch. "You've proven me wrong," he admitted to Lily, uncharacteristically humble. "My son has never looked happier or more centered. Perhaps there is value in perspectives different from my own." It wasn't a wholehearted embrace, but it was progress and more than either of them had expected. The reception was held in the garden's glass-walled atrium, with dinner provided by the same food trucks Lucas and Lily had frequented during their early dates. Instead of a traditional wedding band, they'd created a carefully curated playlist of their favorite songs, played on a vintage sound system borrowed from the store. As evening fell, they took to the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The opening notes of Sam Cooke's "Nothing Can Change This Love" filled the room, the first record they'd listened to together at Nostalgic Notes all those months ago. "You remember telling me that price wasn't an issue for the right record?" Lily asked as they swayed together. "That day you came in looking for Nina Simone," Lucas smiled at the memory. "Of course I do." "I thought you were just another collector with more money than sense," she admitted. "I had no idea you'd end up being the greatest find of my life. And I never imagined that ducking into a record store to escape the rain would lead me to the one person who could see past everything else to the real me," Lucas replied, holding her closer. "Some treasures you don't even know you're searching for until you find them." As their friends and family surrounded them on the dance floor, Lily and Lucas moved in perfect synchrony, two different melodies that had somehow found their harmonious counterpoint in each other. Their journey had just begun, but they were already creating a collection of moments more valuable than any rare vinyl, a lifetime of memories pressed into the grooves of their shared story. A year after their wedding, Lucas and Lily celebrated the grand reopening of Nostalgic Notes, now expanded to include a small performance space for local musicians, and a coffee bar where customers could sit and listen to records before purchasing. The store had become something of a cultural hub in the neighborhood, hosting listening parties and educational events about music history. Their home above the shop had become exactly what they'd envisioned, a warm, personal space that reflected both their personalities. Lucas's rare records shared shelf space with Lily's eclectic collection, their tastes gradually influencing each other as they built a life together. On a crisp autumn evening, they sat on their rooftop garden, a bottle of wine between them as they listened to the sounds of a jazz quartet playing in the store below. Lucas had his arm around Lily, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder. "I have something to tell you," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "I was going to wait, but I don't think I can." Lucas looked down at her curiously. "What is it?" In answer, Lily took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We're going to need to start a children's record collection." Joy flooded Lucas's face as he understood her meaning. "You're pregnant. We're having a baby," Lily nodded, laughing as he lifted her into a careful embrace, spinning her around on the rooftop. "When? How far along? How are you feeling?" The questions tumbled out in his excitement. "About 8 weeks," she told him. "And I'm feeling good, a little tired, but good. I took the test yesterday and had the doctor confirm it this morning." Lucas knelt in front of her, placing both hands reverently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I'm your dad, and I can't wait to meet you." Tears of happiness filled Lily's eyes as she watched this powerful, successful man overcome with emotion at the prospect of fatherhood. In moments like these, the billions in his bank account faded to complete irrelevance compared to the richness of the life they were creating together. Later that night, as they lay in bed discussing names and nursery themes, Lucas suddenly grew quiet, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What is it?" Lily asked, propping herself up on one elbow. "I was just thinking about that first day when I came into the store looking for Nina Simone. If it had been your day off, if I hadn't ducked in there to escape the rain that first time." He shook his head, marveling at the chain of coincidences that had brought them together. "Maybe it wasn't coincidence," Lily suggested. "Maybe some connections are just meant to be, like finding exactly the right record when you need it most." Lucas smiled, pulling her close. "The rarest pressing in the world wouldn't be worth half what I found in that little shop on a rainy afternoon." Outside their window, the city continued its endless rhythm, but in their home above the record store, Lucas and Lily had created a harmony entirely their own, one that would soon include a new voice, adding depth and richness to the composition of their shared life. "I love you," Lucas whispered as Lily drifted toward sleep in his arms. "More than all the music in the world." "I love you too," she murmured back. "My reluctant billionaire." In the quiet that followed, they both knew that the true wealth in their lives had nothing to do with money at all. It was measured in moments like these, in connections, in music, in the family they were building, and in the unexpected journey that had brought them together in a small vintage record store where a billionaire had fallen in love with much more than just the records on the shelves.